But let's get our first caller on. So we've got Terry, and it looks like they from Florida. The family saw a UFO in the neighbor's backyard. Terry, how are you doing?
I'm wonderful. How are you tonight?
Doing well. Could you tell us a little bit about this?
Sure. I was a young kid. My mother was still alive at the time. My father was a police officer, so he worked different shifts. I was working the night shift, so he was sleeping. It was about 9 o'clock at night. Um, we heard what you would imagine, if you can imagine what like light would sound like going over the house. My mother, my sister, and I all were a little bit alarmed. My dad actually woke up out of his sleep in his room, came out with his gun in hand, and we all went out into the backyard to see what was going on. As we walked out in the backyard, we had a fairly large backyard. Our neighbor's backyard, they left half of it to overgrow, so they had like a wood trail to go through. So as we were heading out into the backyard, over their part of the field was a huge flying saucer that had every single light that you can imagine on the outside of it, just tracing it and just like circling it, and all the colors were changing. And this was huge. This was about a football sized field. We all stood there, we all looked at it. We didn't really say anything. I don't remember us even talking during that time frame.
Okay.
Shortly after that, the UFO just shot away without a sound. I mean, it was gone as quickly as as you can ever imagine. That night, I had my nose started bleeding, and they had to actually take me to the emergency room and have them cauterize my nose shut. So we did that, and then we came back home. Nobody ever talked about it. We didn't talk about it for years and years and years. And then I had an impacted wisdom tooth, so they had to do a head scan. And when they did the scan, they noticed that there were two wires that were at the very, very back side of my jaw, very, very deep in my jaw. And the doctor had asked when I had had my jaw broke, and I told him I never had my jaw broke. And he sat there and said, "No, no, you've got two wires back there." I said, "No, no, I'm promising you, I've never had my jaw broke." So when he did the surgery to remove the tooth on the right side of my jaw, he dug into the gum and went back. And when he pulled it out, there was about a 1 inch metal bar, like almost like a wire bar, but in the center of it was like a little ball. And when the doctor pulled it out, like I felt different. It was a weird experience. And when he showed it to me, I just looked at it, and he was like, "So how do you explain this?" And at that time I was kind of, drugged with the anesthetics and everything, the anesthesia. So I didn't really, put two and two together. So then years later, it went back, and I was living in South Florida still, and I was walking our dogs. And as we're coming back home, we saw like it almost looked like a ball of fire, but just like a perfectly round ball of fire just floating in the sky, slowly coming down. And so we're watching that as we're walking our dog. And as we come around the corner to where our house was at, I see my neighbor, who's two doors down, is standing outside in the middle of the street looking up at the same thing that we're looking up at. My partner at the time runs into the house to go get a camera. And as he goes in, that thing comes literally just above the telephone pole. And it's just sitting there for a half a second. And then again, it just took off like a bat out of hell, and was gone, before you can even understand how quickly it left.
So
So,
let's
you
talk
know,
about the first claim. How many
sure.
other people saw this object in the air?
Well, there was my father, my mother, my sister, myself, that were definitely there that saw it.
So you said that you never talked about it after that. How do you know that they saw it and that they saw the same thing that you saw?
No, no, we for about 4 years after my mother passed away, it was just like that night when it happened. Nobody ever talked about it. We didn't talk about what we saw. Like it was just quiet. You know what I mean? Like my
Mm.
father was a police officer, so he didn't want to. That was something that was like, faux pas. You don't talk about it, especially back then. I mean, keep in mind this was back in 1980 something or other when the first incidents occurred.
Okay.
So then years later, I talked with my dad to verify the story because, I saw a show on Unsolved Mysteries that somebody drew the literal spaceship that I saw. So I ran over to my father's house and I was like, okay, explain this. And then he remembered it. So then it confirmed it all.
Have you ruled out the possibility that it was, a drone or perhaps, a military vessel of some kind?
I
Uh,
before we even go down that route,
I think that was.
Yeah, go ahead.
before we even go down that route, it like there's a number of things that sound iffy, and I'm just wondering, like, do you still have the metal rod from your mouth?
I still have the one that's in the left side of my face. I do have that one in there. The Broward County Hospital was the one that took the bar out, so I'm sure that they still have it because he was very, very curious about it. I'm sure I can actually get it and call them and find out, verify it for sure. Yes.
So
Okay.
you
Or I can just cut my face open and get the other one out.
Well, don't cut your face open. I'm definitely not recommending
I
that.
won't do that.
But I mean, I would love to actually see that. Sorry, Thomas.
I mean, I would love to have it get submitted to a lab and analyzed and see the doctor's reports and see if it's anything abnormal or if it's just a metal rod. Like, it sounds to me like I've how do I say this in the most caring kind way, is that, like, this is an event from 1980
Mhm.
and you were a kid at the time, and obviously we're hearing this secondhand from you. So there's that extra layer of, the game of telephone where it's like, I want to believe you, but there's a lot of reasons here for me to be skeptical. And I'm sure you understand that, calling into the show, that, like, it's a pretty substantial claim and extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. So, like, I believe that you remember something and you possibly even saw something. And the reason that I make that distinction is because in the 1990s, there was actually a number of studies that were performed by a doctor named Elizabeth Loftus that found that completely normal, mentally sane people are very, very capable of having false memories and having memories even implanted. And there was follow-up work by a doctor named Julia Shaw that looked at how the brain works and how memories work and how people can form these false memories. And oftentimes it can even happen at a group level. People are exposed to, the same influences in TV shows and things like that. I'm not saying that that's what happened with you, because this is sort of like an armchair diagnostic. Like, I can't just come in and be like, oh yeah, I hear this and it must be that. And that's why I kind of stopped you for a second, Ethan, when you were like, it could have you ruled out it could be a drone. If you ruled out it could be this. Like, there are actually hundreds of things that are mistaken for UFOs. And, like, I could go down a list of, like, just one thing after another. But before we start doing that, like, I want to say, just from hearing it, like, if I hope you'll forgive me for being skeptical of the claim simply based off of a secondhand account from the 1980s.
Right. I mean, that's kind of, that's you're entitled to your opinion. That
Yeah.
changed my life as a child. What I saw changed my fundamental belief that I was born and raised Catholic, and I was told that was never something that was ever going to exist.
Okay.
And since that time, I've researched all kinds of ancient megalithic structures. My entire fundamental religion's beliefs have fundamentally changed because of that. So that wouldn't have been a plane or a drone, because, believe it or not, my company owns many drones, and that's what I do for a living. So I know what things look like when they're flying in the air, and I know what I saw, and I know what still is in my body, that I'm willing to go back to the doctors and they can pull it out and verify it. There's something in there that's foreign. I never broke my jaw. It was never put there by anybody throughout our entire childhood. This was something that happened. There were, having my nose cauterized shut that night at that actual hospital the night that it happened. You know, it's not just hearsay. These are events that actually happened.
Right.
You know, a drone won't make my nose bleed so badly that it won't stop. And I never in my life had that happen prior to then or ever since then. So,
Mhm.
you know, that's just kind of, you know,
Well,
a little
so
stuff, I think.
you know, assuming that you did see something, and again, I'm not entirely ready to even grant that, but for the sake of discussion, let's say that there was like a big thing that was flying overhead, and at that point you can say I saw an unidentified flying object, but like to say that it was extraterrestrial, I'm not sure if that's where you're going with this, but it sounds like it is.
It wasn't, I mean, it was a UFO. It was a saucer. It was a huge football-sized saucer that
Football
was
field or
hovering silently above the
football
tree,
size or football field size?
you know, like a football field size. Our neighbor, we had a huge backyard. Half of their backyard was designated for just woods. This entire object hovered just over the top of that, and that's over an acre. So what is that? More than a football size field?
I wish I knew that. I don't. So I guess to piggyback off what Thomas said is, have you ruled out the possibility of other explanations? Like, what got you from saying, "Hey, this is something flying in the air," to "This is aliens"? Can you draw like how you got from point A to point B on that one?
Because it was something that at the time was physically impossible, and today is still physically impossible. When, you know, from both of those, you know, from the first one that I saw that was an actual flying saucer leaving from our, you know, hovering just above the treetops over our neighbor's backyard and rocketing out of sight so quietly and so quickly, nothing on this planet does that. And it's remarkable that people still think that we're alone and that we weren't their doing of nature.
Well,
So
you
I
know,
mean,
why, why we don't, like why the scientific community is still hesitant to say that there's any life on other planets or that there's any life in other solar systems is because we haven't found it. We haven't observed it. We don't have a body. We've never found an actual alien body or an alien corpse. And all of the sightings that we've seen of unidentified objects have just been that. They've been unidentified. Now, there's, you know, claims of seeing strange objects and strange spy planes and things that look like flying saucers and spaceships out of Area 51 all the time. That is exactly where you would expect to see them if you have a government spending billions and billions of dollars on research. When I hear that you were 5 years old, I mean, there's things that I remember from when I was 5 that are completely not how they went down or not how they occurred. But I have what?
I was 10 years old when that happened.
Sorry, 10 years old
when that happened.
But I mean, there are things that I remember from when I was a teenager or older that, you know, my memory has changed and it's warped the memory, or the retelling of it has shifted it or changed it. And then I've gone back and looked at pictures and it's been very different. So like, I feel like saying you saw some lights hovering over and then it just disappeared in an instant. I mean, one, there are a lot of illusions that light can play, a lot of illusions. And just to give you a couple of examples off the top of my head, I was doing some research on things that are commonly mistaken for UFOs a while back. And like, and I'm not saying that all of these fit your story, but like there are people all the time who will say like, oh yeah, I saw things flying in a smart pattern and interacting with each other, small objects. And it turns out that it's light is reflecting off of birds. There's people that see Venus and it looks like it's moving, but it's just that the planet is the brightest and oftentimes only star in the sky with light pollution. And so with the absence of other stars or objects around it to give a reference point for motion, it appears that it's moving when it's not. There's people who skydived.
Way to describe that would be to the fact that you weren't there, you didn't see it with your eyes, and look at it through that way and see what I saw. You're going off of my story, yes,
Yeah,
but
of course.
you know,
Yeah.
I
So
have
no,
very
but
vivid
where
memories.
I'm
I remember pretty much everything from my childhood all the way up. I'm very, very intelligent,
Oh, I
and
mean, yeah,
you know, I'm sorry that, you know, maybe you don't believe in UFOs or extraterrestrials and stuff, but we're not alone. These beings did come. They've come multiple times, and they've come throughout the entire civilization of mankind, and prior to all the, you know, the ancient stuff that we don't even know about yet.
yeah.
I mean,
so
Well,
they've
and
already
I
been,
don't
we
quick.
haven't been.
I
So
don't want you to feel like
we're just
I'm
learning them.
I don't want you to feel like I'm putting down your intelligence, because and
Yeah.
that's why I preface it by saying, like, the studies that were done on memory, they were just literally a general broad study on how human memory works. It wasn't on whether or not someone had a mental illness. It has nothing to do with whether or not you're intelligent or what your IQ is. Like, this applies equally to Albert Einstein as it does to you, as it does to me. And so when I say that the human memory is incredibly flawed and changes, it's like we think that our memory functions like photographs, but it doesn't, like, not even remotely. There are people in prison right now serving life sentences who were put there by eyewitness testimony, by people who swear that they saw them do the thing and that they remember it exactly how it happened, only for that person to be exonerated later with DNA evidence. And there's a whole organization called the Innocence Project that is doing that in case after case after case. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, I'm not saying this as an insult to you. I'm saying this as, like, I would be very cautious of specific memories I had as a kid, especially if then I find out that, oh, hey, at the time I was 10, I was under either some sort of stress or some sort of incident that caused my nose to bleed. That raises an even bigger red flag for me then. Not because I think that that's evidence of aliens, but because I think that that's evidence of either some kind of head trauma or some type of bleeding potentially in the brain or something that caused your nose to bleed. It's like, that makes me even more suspicious of, you know, what I would have seen on that night when my brain was in that kind of a condition.
So, Terry, if I could, to
And
kind
why
of
would-
piggyback
so
off what
why
Thomas
would
said.
okay, explain
So-
this?
sorry, one second,
Why
Terry.
would if I had
hey,
a
Terry, one
bloody
second.
nose that
Terry?
exact same night?
Terry, can you give me 1 second, please?
Sure.
So just to kind of piggyback off of what Thomas said. Now, this may make me not the best skeptic, but I would say, in my opinion, there is most likely alien life out there. The universe is too friggin' huge. There's too many habitable planets for me not to think there is some type of alien life out there. I guess where I question it is whether that alien life is intelligent enough and has the technology to reach us. But also, to kind of go off what he said with the memory. After my brother passed, I formed some memories. And it wasn't until about 4 years later, 5 years maybe even, where I was talking to my mother about those memories. And she's like, well, one of the things I said, she's like, that's not accurate. I'm like, yes, it was. I'm like, I remember this. I remember. She's like, no, that's not what happened. And she had to walk back one of the memories I had formed from this traumatic event that wasn't accurate. So, and I, you know, like you, I'm not, I wasn't even aware that my memory, like that I screwed up my memory. It was just, in my opinion, due to the traumatic event I endured. And therefore, I essentially, I don't want to say created, but I don't even know the best way to word this. Like, my brain manipulated a memory in my head. So I viewed something that happened in a very different light. And I think that's, correct me if I'm wrong, Thomas, but kind of the point you were trying to make is how unreliable memory can be at times.
Yeah, and not just that, but, like, it could very well be that what you saw was actually a flying object, and an unidentified flying object, and what you saw and what you remember could be two things that are based off of the same event and yet are still very sporadic. And that can be the case without any appeal to, drug use or mental illness or mental instability or anything. You could be perfectly normal, sane, healthy, incredibly intelligent, and still have a memory of an event that actually happened where the memory has been altered in some way, shape, or form. So when I hear that there was an object flying in the sky that was the size of a football field that was covered in lights and then took off pretty much at the speed of light, I hear that. I'm like, you know what? There probably was some sort of object that you saw. I'll grant you that. And, people have been seeing flying objects in the sky pretty much starting around the time that we started sending airplanes and blimps up in the sky. People have been seeing what they claimed were aliens pretty much since the public was, had these thoughts of, Roswell, and then the movie industry.
Been on all the cave rocks.
What?
And all the it's written all over from all the centuries, on all the cave rocks, on all the megalithic structures. Like, they have always been there. They're still here. People just don't want to realize it's probably them watching us 24/7.
That's actually, I would really hold your feet to the fire on that. I would recommend, if like, and we can go for specific instances, but I'll give you one really big one that I'll see the Ancient Aliens proponents bring up a lot, and that is in ancient Egypt, you'll see Akhenaten, and they'll point to, his, I believe it's Akhenaten, in his long elongated head, and they'll say, look, he was an alien. And they'll point to, the sunbeams coming down. They're like, look, that's a UFO. And yet there isn't a single Egyptologist who will actually go with that narrative, because like, they know the context, they know the other archaeological finds, they know that there is extensive writing about this guy and his worship of the sun, and they know the symbolism of what that type of drawing represented and what those objects were specifically meant to represent. There's another great example I just saw. I wish I could remember the channel, where it was an expert in ancient Sumerian history who was looking
texts that show all the gods that were living for 23,000 years at a time, that ruled man and ruled civilization.
And then there's a tablet where it looks like there's, in the sky, there's like what appears to be a solar system. And they're like, see, they knew, they had special knowledge that the earth wasn't flat and that there were planets orbiting around the sun. And yet this guy breaks it down. He's like, actually, that's not at all what it represents. It looks like that. And if you don't have any understanding of their writing style and their art and their representation, but then he walks through it piece by piece. And he's like, actually, whenever they draw a star, they draw it like this. When they draw the sun, they draw it like this. These 5 things represented, the specific lights that they would see in the sky. And there was nothing there on that tablet that couldn't be explained by just regular, ordinary people in the Bronze Age looking up at the sky with the naked eye. And on top of that, we actually have writings and texts that indicate that they did believe that the earth was flat and didn't have special knowledge. So like, you really have to look at the context with this and go to the experts, not to the people who are speculating based off of images.
People should go to the experts, not just following, people that don't know what they're talking about, because there are experts in this world that have now gone into where you're talking about in Egypt and are finding, things that are proving the DNA strains are not of this earth. And they are.
Those aren't experts. Those aren't experts, though. Like those are the ancient aliens people and the people on, the History Channel and stuff who are going in.
No.
And
so this is a documentary that was on.
Look up the names of the people and pull them up and do some research on them, and you will find that they'll have, listed next to their name, explanations as to why they're a pseudo-archaeologist or a pseudo-historian or a pseudoscience proponent, and why they're not accepted within academia, why they're not accepted by the experts. And it's not just that it's this secret society that's trying to hide information. It's because there are people who dedicate decades of their life really going boots on the ground and learning the methods for how we know the things that we know, and using the tools of archaeology and understanding the historical method of how to analyze text. And they're taking that vast background of knowledge and information. Let me finish this thought real quick. They're taking this vast knowledge and information, and then all of a sudden they're having someone come along and cherry pick and selectively pull a few things out of context, and then put forth this circumstantial evidence to make their case for aliens. And it's, to be honest, it's quite frankly insulting to the experts in the field, because they're pissing on the integrity of just mountains of evidence to the contrary.
What should be insulting to the experts in the field are when people actually see something multiple times and they witness it with their own eyes. They should listen to them and realize that what you're saying isn't correct. Dude, you're like, Thomas, you're not saying anything that's correct. I'm telling you that much because you didn't see what I saw. It's not just a plane. It wasn't anything that you can ever imagine. So you're talking about stuff that you don't know about. So you didn't see what I saw, so you can't tell me what I saw. I never claimed to tell you. I never claimed to tell you what you saw. I said very possibly you saw an actual event. I don't know. I wasn't there. I gave you reasons why I'm skeptical, and I gave you reasons why I think that everyone else should be skeptical, because I see instances like this all the time. This is what I do for a living, is I investigate. More skeptical is listening to somebody like you talking when you're talking about stuff that you don't know what you're talking about. You're saying that people are experts. Who are the experts you're listening to? That's what I would like to know, because you say, oh, it's just the people that you listen to. So it's what? Who?
I don't. I mean, I can give you names.
Is that who you listen to?
So Terry, real quick, I
can give you names. I can give you, Dr. Zahi Hawass, Manfred Bitak. I can give you people like Israel Finkelstein, and like there's a whole list of experts in the field of archaeology and history that will straight up take these documents and they will tear them apart. Go into any department. Go to the University of Chicago right now and go, and
Roman Catholic religion good with,
and go talk to an Egyptologist. There are very reputable, incredibly intelligent people, and present one of these pieces of information to them and say, what do you think about this? And hear them out. Don't just have them tell you you're wrong. Ask them why. Why is this not, why is there reason to believe that this isn't aliens? And I promise you, like, if you take the time and you sit down and you ask them, and you show them the evidence, and you say, hey, I want to know the bigger context. Why do you believe the things that you do? I promise you that they will walk you through it and give you a satisfactory answer. Well, assuming that they have the time to, they will give you a satisfactory answer and show you the methodology as to how they got there. And that's what's important. Is
I can do the same thing.
So real quick, Terry, I'm going to give you the last. I'm going to give you the last word in just one moment, because we do have to wrap up and go to the next caller. But I do just want to kind of bridge a communication gap here. Myself or Thomas are definitely like not saying, hey, you're wrong. Hey, you didn't see anything. We're just trying to encourage you to ask more questions before you reach.
So would you like me to ask the beings that sat there and abducted us? Is that who I should ask, or you guys that have not seen it? That what makes more sense to me? Talking to people that have seen it, or talking to people that have no clue of it? What would you believe, dude?
I get what you're saying, but as we kind of said earlier, witness testimony isn't always reliable. Again, otherwise there wouldn't be innocent people that have been or are on death row based on somebody else's word. So
I agree.
Yeah. All I think we're both trying to say is not saying you're wrong, just ask more questions. But we got to wrap it up. So in 15 seconds or less, I'll give you the last word, Terry.
Well, we've never been alone, people. It's ridiculous for anybody to think that we've ever been alone. It's coming to a very close ending soon. So just buckle up. It's going to be a fun ride.
All right. Well, that is a topic I would actually love to talk about more. But Terry, I appreciate you taking the time to call in today. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
You too. Have a wonderful night. Bye-bye, guys.
Don't stop investing in your retirement plans, people.
Yeah, challenging people's beliefs can be difficult, and I'm finding like there it can be so difficult to at times have these conversations, and they can go off the rails by just wording something incorrectly. Next thing you know, you're going at each other, and I try and avoid that.
See,
But I think,
there's a real danger to this. There's a real danger to this way of thinking, and it's the same danger that happened when you had what was the guy Pastor Camping, Harold Camping, that claimed that the world was ending and that Jesus was coming back, and he gave specific dates, and he failed like 5 times in a row and over the course of a few decades. And like there was a woman who was terrified about the world is ending, and so in order to save herself the horrors of the end times, she slit her own throat and the throats of her children. And it's
oh my
like
God.
it's incredibly harmful. So for him to just be like, hey, it's all coming to an end really soon, the end is near, I'm like, yeah, the end was near for the Heaven's Gate cult, who thought that there was a UFO hiding behind this, behind the Hale-Bopp comet. And the end was near for the Art Bell radio show that promoted that BS idea. And as a result of that, the Heaven's Gate cult went and committed the largest mass suicide on American soil, thinking that they would ride this UFO all the way to new bodies and be reincarnated. And so it's like, I understand that there are reasons why people believe things. There are things that people see, and there are things that people see that are very convincing and seem like they're potentially an alien extraterrestrial spaceship. But if you don't have an identification, it's unidentified. So to claim that it's extraterrestrial based off of the memory of your 10-year-old self, and then to go and find these pseudoscientific ancient aliens people and their hypotheses, I'm just like, that's a stretch. There's huge reason to be skeptical and doubtful, because there's a lot of things that have been debunked and shown to be hoaxes, and we don't have positive evidence. We just have a lack of evidence and eyewitness testimony, which is not convincing to me.
Right. And I think the biggest thing is that I've learned from becoming a skeptic is to try to avoid jumping to conclusions when you don't have enough information. So let's say you do see something. Okay, you saw something, but we don't necessarily know that what you saw is aliens or something else. So I think more information is needed before we can say that he indeed saw some type of alien vessel.